Hi, everyone. My name is Camille Jones, and I am the former Sphinx Features Fellow at the National Orchestral Institute Festival and founder of Voices Unheard. Originally created as a chamber music series at the University of Maryland, Voices Unheard is becoming a growing collective of artists of color and their allies. Voices Unheard is a student-led collective dedicated to creating spaces for underrepresented artists in which their work is seen, valued, and celebrated. It aspires to do this by identifying and amplifying underrepresented artists through inclusive programming, commissioning new works, and community engagement initiatives. I am proud to be joined by 2020 Sphinx Futurist Fellow Chaz Salazar and founder and executive director of Play on Philly, Stanford Thompson, for a discussion on this future of the classical music industry. Before we begin, I will formally introduce my guests. Mexican-American flutist Chaz Salazar employs classical music as a catalyst for social justice as an orchestral musician, teaching artist, and musical activist. He works to ensure that students who are part of marginalized communities, specifically those of socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds and people of color, have equitable exposure and access to music and music education. In his hometown of Phoenix, Arizona, he has served as the flute instructor for Harmony Project Phoenix, and Ellis Sistema-inspired program. Chaz received his early formal music training from a similar program called Rosie's House, a music academy for children which provides free music lessons to under-resourced youth. He was recently awarded the 2020 National Orchestral Institute Sphinx Futurist Fellowship, a unique fellowship available to Black and Latinx musicians that combines arts administration, orchestral performance, festival curation, and community engagement. Chaz earned his Bachelor of Music and Master's from Arizona State University and is currently in the Artist Diploma program at the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music under the mentorship of Damar McGill. Yay. Okay. Stanford Thompson. Stanford Thompson is a musician and educator who serves as founder and executive director of Play on Philly and founding board chairman of El Sistema USA, bringing music education to students in underserved areas throughout Philadelphia. Recognized as a TED Fellow, Stanford believes that music education is a powerful tool for positive personal and community change. Stanford serves on the faculty of a Global Leaders Program and regularly presents at major universities and music conservatories about leadership, entrepreneurship, and social justice. As a consultant, he has guided the development of dozens of music programs across the U.S. and collaborated with major orchestras, higher education institutions, and arts organizations to develop new strategies and initiatives that help provide equitable access to the arts. As a professional trumpeter, Stanford has performed as a soloist and member with major orchestras around the world and continues to perform chamber music and jazz. Is a native of Atlanta, Georgia, and holds degrees from the Curtis Institute of Music and the New England Conservatory Sistema Fellows Program. Thank you for joining me today, my awesome guest. Great, yay! Now, I'd like to first begin this discussion with a sort of broad topic. So, we are currently living in a time where many people are waking up or becoming more vocal about systemic issues within their career field and society as a whole, in light of the series of injustices we've experienced this year during a global pandemic. I'd like to begin this discussion with a broad question, which is, how do you see the classical music industry evolving in light of this heightened awareness of systemic racism within the US? And maybe we can start with Stanford, and Chaz and I will pitch in on our own experiences.
Yeah, so Camille, thanks again for having me. Chaz, it's great to see you again. And I just hope that both of you are safe and healthy and encouraged. So again, thanks for having me. I think what you bring up about kind of systemic racism in the field, it's a big topic. Um, uh, but I want to be really, really careful in talking about a definition for systemic racism. So I kind of want to provide what my thoughts are about that definition, and then how I think it kind of ties into our field. So, I mean, first of all, I think that the racism we're talking about, it's not like KKK members with their hoods um, and their nooses walking around. And I think that we've been talking past each other about kind of what's going on. Um, so the way that I kind of look at it is that um, there's this prejudice that happens that I would describe as just a lot of people doing and saying, a lot of really dumb things that are hurtful, that are designed in that way. But I think it's when you get the race prejudice and the misuse of power by systems and institutions, I think that is what drives systemic racism. So, for example, if there's an organization where the entry level is so high to get in, meaning that in order for you to be competitive, you would have already have had to take private lessons for many, many years, preferably with someone who kind of knows the answers on the test. You would have to secure a really expensive instrument. You would then have to fly somewhere and stay up, a night or two in order to make that happen. I think that's when there are things on a systemic level that are built in. If there's a school that has a financial aid policy that is based around being the best sounding kid, not really based off of need, then I think that you have another issue that is, systemically based, that also can be tied and motivated by race. So I think in those instances, in defining what the problem is, I wouldn't necessarily say that systemic racism is that somebody has said something off color, and now that organization is, necessarily racist. But I would certainly say in the issues that we're talking about, that there are barriers that are built in that make it impossible for progress to be made, especially for people of color. So to jump into your question about this whole classical music industry evolving, I think first it needs to be fixed. One could argue if it needs to be blown apart, but there definitely needs to be a lot of internal healing of people and a lot of really careful looks at how these institutions are made. Who holds the power? How does that power get transferred to people of color? And I think with that soul searching, then we can really be on a pathway of evolution that, quite frankly, I think is going to take an entire generation.
Mm.
If we think about our young people, think about this. For like the past 40 years in most cities across the United States, music education was cut out of the public schools, which is a very important step to many, many more kids having a training and a background with music to even kind of nurture a dream of one day being on the stage as a professional musician. And I think that if we could work even at that basic level, then that will long-term help things evolve. Another point to kind of make about that is, I hear this cry from conservatories to find more diverse students. I get it. But let's be real about something. When I grew up in Atlanta, there's only a handful of us of color that played in the youth orchestra. And unfortunately, it's still the same thing today. When I look at Philadelphia, where I currently live, it's a very similar picture. So at the end of the day, there's really only a handful of people of color that are even in a position to be competitive to get into our top music schools. And unfortunately, there's not an army of us that's like they're ready to knock down the doors. I'm not saying that we don't exist, but certainly saying that from a systemic standpoint, a lot of us of color at that age have not been given the proper resources and support to be at the levels that they need to be at. So again, the idea that like within the next year or two, these schools will become more colorful. Again, I think that's going to take a generation, but it's going to take work right now. And I think there's a role that each individual organization, if you're a summer camp or a professional orchestra or a summer festival or a pre-college training program, a community music school, I think there are things that organizations across the country can do individually and collectively to solve this problem over time.
Yes, I totally agree with everything you just said. Okay, I'm gonna let Chaz respond. I'll say.
Absolutely, thank you, Camille, and thank you, Stanford. I wanted to unpack a little bit more about these issues of resources and support that students who come from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds wouldn't have, right? And a lot of times that's intersectional with being a person of color. I know for myself personally, as a person of color and as someone who is financially didn't have all the resources growing up, as you explained, there were so many barriers along my way to even get to college and then to finish college, right? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what I've been experiencing in this time period, during this time period of COVID, and during this time period of what we can call this racial reckoning that our country is now coming to terms with and starting to acknowledge, right? Because before there was no acknowledgement. Now it's just starting to see the issue, which is the first step to change. And so right now, where my positionality right now, where I'm at in my career, where I'm at in my aspirations of what I want to do, I really started to question. Because I started to question thinking, well, why? I know why, and I know why initially, but I've been experiencing this cognitive dissonance lately, and I think it's related to the traditions that have been instilled in this classical music industry that contribute to the systemic racism and systemic barriers that are there against us BIPOC and against us who are socioeconomically disadvantaged. And so I think part of that is I've been doing a lot of thinking. So I thought, well, okay, so what have I been training for my whole life? Basically, as an Olympian, training my whole life to audition for a symphony orchestra. And what is that symphony orchestra about? I know that there's not a lot of people of color in the symphony orchestra. There's not a lot of people that look like me or us on stage. I know that there's not a lot of people in the audience that look like us. I know there's not a lot of people on the board, not a lot of donors that look like us. And so I was thinking, okay, well, so throughout my training to get to that point, to get to one of those seats, I now realize, well, the symphony orchestra as a paradigm, as an institution, say in the United States, this is where we're positioned, is an organization that specifically specializes in the bulk of their music by Eurocentric composers, right? By composers. The majority of the musicians playing this Eurocentric white music are white musicians, and the majority of the audience members are white audience members, specifically white audience members who have a lot of money, to put frankly, right? Because they pay a lot of money for those tickets. And then you have the donors, right, who are majority are white, that donate to the salaries of the musicians and that just to the organization as a whole. So I then started to question, well, that is very limiting in the canon that is being played first just programmatically by the orchestra. It's very limiting. It's problematic because it's, again, very specialized. If we boil it down, an orchestra is just a cover band of the same music over and over and over again. So the last time I checked, that's called a broken record, and I didn't think that a broken record is something we want to continue to perpetuate. So really, the book that we're reading from we're reading from one page in a symphony orchestra. Again, this is something that I've trained for. We've all been training for our whole lives, and some of us have reached it, Stanford, and others of us have not yet. You know, and so, do I really want to continue reading the same page over and over again? Because there's so many other pages that were either erased, ripped out, or just completely dismissed and not acknowledged. So that kind of goes along the lines of, well, you mentioned Stanford, and this is why I'm talking about this longer tangent. You mentioned, well, there's the argument just to it needs to be fixed or just dismantled completely, and these are the thoughts that I'm having a lot of. And so this doesn't go to say that this specialized music, that this one page that we've been reading over and over again, is bad, because it's actually very beautiful. I mean, this music is very beautiful, but it's not the whole truth. If I'm going to be a truth teller, I need to know the whole truth, not just one page of it, right? So then that's what I mean, where I've been having this cognitive dissonance, where I'm like having this revelation of seeing, because for all my life, I thought of the classical music, which is to a lot of people synonymous to the symphony orchestra, as something that is this end-all, be-all, pinnacle of human achievement. It's the normative. It's the art music, but it's not. I mean, and who says that that's the art music? Why was that made a thing? You know, because it was never taught that way. It was never spoken to me that was it. It was like assumed, like already in society, and it's this culture, highbrow music. So I was having this conversation with a good friend of mine, Priscilla Reinhardt. She's a member of the Sarasota Orchestra, a former alum of the New World Symphony. And really, I was like, well, isn't that also like narcissistic, right? Going to see the same music, white people going to see the same music over and over again. And it's a bit of a fetish, you know, because it's a record going over and over again. So nonetheless, if we're talking now, we have this thing, right? And of course, orchestras are starting to work on being more diverse and being more inclusive. But again, it's not the rate that I want to be, that my rate that I need to be going at. And it's all this history. Sorry, my hand keeps moving. But it's this history that has been in the past. Now we need to move forward from that and basically fix all of that, reconcile it, tell the whole truth. And so I want to talk solution-based now, or resolution rather based. And I think that leads into the next question. So we've identified, like I've identified what, for myself, what this has been, and now I'm trying to identify what I can do to move forward. And I have some ideas about that, but I'm going to let Camille speak now, and then we can go from
there. Thank you both for sharing all of that. It's just very amazing. I wanted to give my own sort of insight, and then I think this will tie into our next question, our next big question. And I know we also have some questions in the comments, so we might want to touch on those later. But I've also been, having conversations with people about what you've both been mentioning, and especially what you're talking about, Chaz, is how we're in this sort of bubble in the classical music world, and there's always conversation around, well, like how can we invite more diversity? How can we how can we make classical music seem popular or fresh again or whatever, but we're unwilling to invite those other voices into the conversation. Like we're not playing music by them. Like we're not listening to them for input. And we like you said, we're playing like this broken record. And it's like almost as if we're just playing for ourselves. Like we're not actually playing for a community or a community outside of like the orchestra or whatever your organization is. And another thing that Stanford was talking about how, well, maybe we should just get rid of it, like build it up or whatever. And that reminds me of how what we're currently experiencing in terms of like the symbolic breaking downs of systems through these monuments or like these Confederate statues coming down, and also like reform, and thinking about how there's legislation that we're trying to pass in terms of holding police officers accountable, and I feel like that kind of reflects how we should be treating our own professors and students within music institutions. And one of the things that I would think would help to make the classical music industry more inclusive or feel more inviting, especially for younger students of color, is having some sort of like sustainable method of holding people accountable via some sort of like code of conduct or like registry in which these professors or music directors or students, whoever, we're keeping like documenting complaints against these people, so that and depending on like the extent of that complaint, then proper consequences will happen, right? Like I feel like one of the things that I've been hearing, and it's really astonishing to me, is just how many common threads there are at different institutions of misbehavior by professors, music directors, and students. We're seeing in social media people calling out, the same sorts of people who have a reputation of, sexual harassment or racism, whatever, but they're not being reprimanded for it. And I feel like that is a big factor in creating an environment that is more accepting of other cultures. And yes, so I really strongly feel that, the main reason why these common threads are there is because these people know that they can get away with it. And so there needs to be they need to know that they will be punished for the actions, essentially. And that's something that I personally, going on to our next question of solutions, want to advocate for. So my next big question was, what are some tips that you would say to young arts leaders of color, especially trying to work within or change the institutions they're a part of? And are there things students and institutions should avoid when navigating diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts? We'll start with Stanford.
Sure. It's a lot of stuff that y'all just put on the table. I'll get to the questions as quickly as I can, because Camille, you brought up some really excellent points. Plus, there's a certain amount of energy today that, Camille, I'm hearing from people like you that I didn't have 10 years ago. First of all, we weren't that organized. Curtis, for example, had a Black student group. And we got together and we had a great time, really great fellowship. And we brought a lot of students from Curtis kind of into our world to experience, quite frankly, Black culture. But we didn't have a Black Lives Matter movement. And then we didn't have what happened, unfortunately, in as a result of the George Floyd murder and the murder of several others like Breonna Taylor and others during the time, we didn't have that energy, and we didn't have that energy on the backdrop of the pandemic, where I think all of those factors together push people to a point where finally Black Lives Matter. I mean, it was like, whoa, folks, whoa, we've been saying this for a while. All of a sudden, there are people coming out of the woodworks, like, you know, the head of the NFL saying, hey, I messed up. And it's like, dude, you've been messing up for a long time. So anyway, I just want to keep that in mind. And also, Camille, to just say there are people like you and your colleagues and friends that I think are pushing this thing in a way that even old people like, you know, Chaz and myself, like we're a little bit removed from that. So first of all, to say kind of keep pushing, I think that y'all are going to set up a lot of the rules and, quite frankly, what it actually looks like to change an institution. Y'all are at the forefront of it. I mean, we're trying to stay out of your way and support people like you. But I think kind of more specifically to it, I mean, it's the power, generally speaking, rests within white people. I don't really think, Camille, the work is between you, myself, Chaz, other, you know, arts leaders of color. I like to say, I think like white people in our field should go sit in a room for a couple of months, work it out, and come out and ready to share the power that they have. Either build bigger tables or get up from their seats and let other people sit down. It doesn't mean that they still can't partake from the table. It's just give some other people a seat at that table. So specifically, I think things that can be done, there has to be a consistency of the push. I think that we have to also be really clear on what vocabulary we are using. How are we defining diversity and equity and inclusion? And then realize that I think there's a two-way street, that you can be as diverse and inclusive as possible, but I actually have to feel it, and I have to feel like I belong in that space. And there's plenty of Black and brown excellence in classical music. There are so many voices that have been unheard throughout this entire time that classical music has been around. But it's really clear that we have been ignored. I remember growing up in Atlanta, and you got to keep in mind, like, I was growing up in the time of like Monica and like T.I. And Outkast and Ludacris. I also grew up listening to jazz, and I grew up listening to classical music, and all of that spoke to me in different ways. And I think that's okay. I remember Tiger Woods, like hitting the, you know, the beginning and the peak of his career. And just probably a 10-minute walk from my house was a golf course on the PGA. And we used to go, me and my buddies, we would go and stand outside the gate and watch him play. We'd wait for hours until he got close to one of the holes so that we could actually take a good look at him. But what's wrong with that picture? We're on the other side of the gate, looking in, waiting for him for that one moment. And I think that's very symbolic of us essentially waiting for our moment. We're waiting for that one time of the year, like Martin Luther King Day. And the unfortunate part is that, you know, we should stop waiting on the other side of the fence. We should be really welcomed into the space, and our voices need to be heard. Conductors, composers, soloists, guest artists, guest faculty members. I mean, there's so many ways to make this happen, and to be part of a longer term change. So I would certainly say that I don't think the problem is on us. I guess that's what I want to be really clear about. I also don't think it is entirely on us to educate people. I think that our stories alone and our experiences and our ideas are enough for the people who have power to do different things with that power. And, you know, I would say that it really matters, like who has certain information, who's sitting on the other side of the audition screen, and the type of mentorship and help, so that when we arrive on the other side of the screen, that we are best prepared. But the screen will come down eventually. And if it doesn't come down at the final round, it will come down when it's time to do a trial week or 2 or a month. And when that screen comes down, we have to be welcomed into the space. We have to be supported in that time. And also, in some ways, protected, because we can't be foolish that there aren't people sitting around the table making decisions that, quite frankly, don't want us there. So I think there's kind of all of those components that kind of play together. And when you kind of ask the question, like, are there things that students and institutions should avoid when navigating these things? Yeah, it's like everything from tokenism, you know, other people feeling othered in all of this. And I think there needs to be some really, really bold action. Chaz, when you were talking about earlier about, I hope I'm saying this right, so correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but you're tying a thread through the white audiences, the white donors, the white music being played, like all of that stuff. That takes bold action to stand up and say, like, we want something different. And we see the world in a different way, and we actually want to stand up for it and try something new. Now, part of me feels like, really, are orchestras really going to do this? Are conservatories really going to do this work now that we've been talking about for a long time? That question is out there. I'm sitting here saying, you know, I'll see it when I see it. But what I'm focused on is that how can I channel my energy towards actually building new systems that actually work properly, and new partnerships, and a focus around what it will take for people to really contribute in that type of environment. So anyway, that's kind of where my mind goes these days. Because again, I think a lot of these institutions have a lot to work out. And I don't think the majority of them will do that inner work that I talked about earlier, that it will really take to make change.
Yeah, thank you for saying all that. I was gonna say that, oh gosh, no, I'm losing my point. It was to your point about, will they like actually follow through? Okay, and do that inner work. Well, I was actually thinking about that in, you know, in terms of the sort of hypocrisy that we've been seeing of people putting out certain statements, and you know, all of a sudden all these people are like down for the cause, but like previously, you know, their actions or words said otherwise, and you know, the makeup of their organization says otherwise. And however, I do feel that since there are a lot of people saying that they're supporting Black Lives Matter, and like they are, you know, will come up with ways to tackle these issues and whatnot, you know, although, you know, maybe not specifically saying how they're going to do that, right? Because they don't know yet. I feel like, well, those are our receipts, right? So how can we can't let them not follow through because they put it out into the universe. We've all heard them say this. So this is our moment. I think we great time to hold people accountable, because they have themselves said that they were going to be more diverse, they were going to be more inclusive, and that they support Black Lives Matter. So now it's like, okay, well, I'm coming to you and I'm telling you this is how you should do this, and it's your responsibility to listen and follow through. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about that. Okay, maybe one more thing. Yes, okay. And I think I'm gonna come back to some of the questions a little to maybe at the end. And it actually reminds me what we are talking about of a course that I was taking at my school called, it's the Multicultural Psychology course, which basically explains human thoughts, feelings, and behaviors through the lens of culture, justice, and equity. And this class was very enlightening for us as students because we got to explore a wide range of topics that are generally considered sensitive or that people avoid talking about, you know, like white supremacy, implicit bias, etc. And one of the things that we brought up in the class was like, should this be a requirement that all students take, like regardless of your major? And the overwhelming majority like said yes. Like this is something that everyone should be educated about, and you know, doing that inner work, because it directly informs like how we are moving about our spaces, what, you know, our career, how we're doing our craft, and how to apply our craft in a real world context. And because we live in the real world and we can't just pretend like these things don't exist or that they don't actually directly impact us. So yeah, and that's something that I would like to push for. And then I you know, to your point about like the people at the heads of these institutions, that I know they need to these faculty need to be doing this, you know. Yeah, so okay. I want to actually does anyone else want to say something?
In regards to what we already spoke about.
Yes. I just wanted to make sure.
I think just to add that, and this is going to tie in, I think, to the next question, but I just think the orchestra as we've known it is a monument, is one of those monuments that we do want to dismantle. So it's then created a foundation, right? That is a strong foundation. So create a new monument that actually exemplifies what we want and what it should have been all along, right? Because if we're going to have a monument, we might as well be proud of a monument, a diverse, inclusive, equitable monument, right? So, that's just something I wanted to add.
Yes.
Yeah, and the only thing I wanted to add to this is it kind of just goes back to this thought of the pandemic that we're in. A lot of our organizations have significantly less resources to work with today. I'm not trying to give them an out or make an excuse, but I do want to be real that, for example, I think about the Kennedy Center, who has, you know, furloughed a lot of their staff. There's just no way at this moment to move forward any new initiatives in this regard because a lot of their staff isn't there to do the work or implement the work. And I feel really, really bad for a lot of our orchestras and museums and lots of arts organizations that are facing some unique challenges. However, I will say this though, I think it is the perfect time for especially boards, senior administration, those that are still on the clock, to set aside a significant chunk of time to carefully think through what types of changes they want. So when they open their doors again, people are walking into a completely different space. So I do think there's that opportunity for that. I think it will slow down some of this progress. But I'm not upset now. I will be upset when doors open up, I mean, quite frankly, in January or even beyond, and that work has not been completed. That's when I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to peace out for a moment. And then the second thing I just want to say very quickly is that I hope that we put more energy into reimagining something new in this time. If I were most of these organizations, I would actually be scared that there are talented people, even talented people of color, that are amazing musicians, administrators, strategists, thought leaders, that in the art space are building things that could get the attention of their major donors, or major foundations. When I think about Mellon Foundation, completely change how they're doing arts funding. They're the largest arts funder in the country. So I'm just thinking, for some people, that great idea that you have now is time to write it down on a sheet of paper, be really clear on how you see the world, and send that over to places like the Mellon Foundation, local foundations, donors, and start having conversations today. Because you never know, like the whole, Black Lives Matter Symphony Orchestra could sprout up in, Chicago next year, because there were a handful of people that brought it together. And the MacArthur Foundation and the Joyce Foundation and, Mellon teamed up to make some of that happen. So anyway, I think this could be a very, very fantastic time. I just hope that, again, our more legacy arts institutions are being forward thinking right now, incorporating all of the issues that we're talking about to make sure it's part of that institution's DNA, that they're trying to secure the funds that will be needed and the human resources, which I hope look like more of us, to make those things happen. So again, when those doors open up, it's a completely new thing.
Yes, definitely. All of that. So I want to move on to our next sort of big topic. So I know that you and Chaz have spoken before about a new organization that you are a part of, or starting, Neemon, and I wonder if you're comfortable sharing a bit about that, or your experience with that in particular.
Well, yeah. So yes, I mean this. I don't know, Chaz, if you want to say something. But
no, sorry. Okay. Whenever I put the mute on, it just covers the middle of the screen, and I can't see your eyes, Stanford, and I want to see your eyes, but I don't. So I'm like in this awkward state. But anyway, yeah. Can you tell us about Neemon?
Sure. Yeah, I can try to sit up or something, but I didn't think my eyes were that interesting. But I appreciate it, Chaz. I could use all the help I can get. So Neemon, it stands for the National Instrumentalist Mentoring and Advancement Network. The acronym NIMAN.org, people can go to and take a look at what we've started to put together. But we really see Neemon as a national association of organizations that are committed to furthering equity and opportunities for aspiring classical musicians of color. And the whole goal is, how do we actually create a level playing field for these musicians? And at the end of the day, I think that what we can achieve, again, is that level playing ground, so that more musicians can get the type of support needed. But overall, I mean, the way that we kind of look at this is it's really in two different kind of parallel paths. The first one is really about teaching and training of the musician, of mentoring and supporting the young professional, and also kind of widening a pathway for musicians of color so that they can be successful in the field. It's not all about how do we help musicians sound good, because unfortunately, I think a lot of the initiatives that are out there are centered around how can we make you, people of color, better. So if you just join this fellowship program, if you just go to this summer festival, if you just go to this conservatory, then we can essentially fix you and that you alone becoming a better musician is all you need. So we think the second parallel path to that, and I'm not taking away from that, that's very, very important. Folks got to sound good. People need to practice. There's no way around that one. But I think there's a second pathway that runs parallel to that, is that how can organizations overcome kind of structural inequities that are really baked into their policies, their systems, their practices, that really prevent opportunities to be given to deserving and aspiring musicians of color in the first place. And this, again, it goes back to the first time young people pick up instruments, to what happens in their very first youth ensemble experience, which could be in the 6th or 7th grade, like, their county band or their county orchestra, all the way up to the state orchestra, to the local youth orchestras. It really, really matters what opportunities are given. And again, there's been a lot of stuff of prejudice that has happened against me. The most hurtful things were things like, in the 6th grade, they thought I couldn't play the part, so they put me on second trumpet. Didn't even hear me. It's just their eyes told them something. And other issues that even I had at places like Interlochen, where while I had really, really great teachers and coaches, there was a conductor or two who wanted things to be a little bit different. So, I think those are some of the things that are much, much more hurtful when I haven't even been given the opportunity to learn or to grow from an experience, or even an opportunity to just be able to prove myself that I can handle this and I can do it. And honestly, I have similar things in my professional career now as an administrator, of being given opportunities to be in certain places. So that's really what Niman overall is about. We're looking forward to launching this fall. There'll be much, much more information, but I would encourage people to go to our website, poke around a little bit about what we've done so far, and sign up to receive updates. But we anticipate in the middle of September of formally launching and continuing the work forward. So.
Awesome. That's amazing. Yeah, so I posted the link to the Niman website so everyone can view that, and any other links that I will make sure to post that with the recording. So this is being recorded, so when I post this, we'll have people can view this later. Cool. I wanted to, oh man, because we are running out of time. So I'm debating if we should maybe go over one more.
How can people support Voices Unheard?
How can you support? You can. Yes. So I was going to mention that. So let's just go into that. Fine. We'll go with that. So I have a website. So it would be really awesome for you all to poke around on my website, which I'm getting ready to put on this chat here. Okay. And so Voices Unheard recently became fiscally sponsored by Fractured Atlas, which is this arts organization dedicated to providing tools and resources to artists. And this will allow us to accept tax-deductible donations. And I am actually in the process of curating a concert series that will happen late. It'll start later this month, and I'm collaborating with multiple Black and Brown musicians from all over the states for this online series. We'll be playing works predominantly by Black composers, actually, and yes. So, and I am in the process of fundraising for that event. And supporting the artists. So any support people are able to give, would be great. Oh, what were you saying?
So, yeah. So how much money do you need for that project?
Oh, we're just talking about actual. Okay.
Let's hear a number. Let's hear it.
Okay. All right. Well, at the moment, well, okay. So I would like to have at least like $600 to $800 more than I have right now. And I ultimately I'm trying to raise I'm going for like 1200 to 1400. That's sort of the range they're looking at. But yes, so I'm getting there. I'm like halfway. So yes, but
Okay, so you need $800. And Camille, since you just asked me for money, and it was an amazing pitch that you gave me about your project, I'm more than happy. I will send you over $400,
oh
and I
my
want to
god,
challenge everybody who's listening to help Camille right now get the other $400.
oh my
So
goodness.
just want to put that one out there. I'll make this donation once we get off this thingy, so that you have that. But I do want to encourage people to jump in. Let's help Camille get this project done. So tomorrow she can call everybody and say, you have a gig. We're going to make this project happen. Okay.
Oh my
All right.
god.
Thank you, people, for making that gift. Again, you can go to voicesunheardproject.org, click
Yes,
on
we have.
donate, and put some money in there. So I'm putting up half of the $800, the top of the range that you talked about, and I just want my friends to put in the rest of this money. Let's make this happen for
Oh
Camille.
my god. Thank you so much, Stanford. I was not expecting that. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Okay. Well, um,
Look at that. You got 500, 600 now. Oh, look at that. We got 700. Oh, and I know Tita's going to put in the last 100. I can
oh my
feel it. I can sense it. People, let's not stop there. Let's make sure that Camille can get this project going.
god.
So, and if I see another 100 pop in, I will put in $500 if I see that we have reached $500 tonight. So I think we're already confirmed at 300 that people are putting in. So just putting that out there. I'll be watching the chat.
This is
Okay.
amazing. Y'all are so great. Thank you so much. So we are kind of going over. I didn't mean for it to go this long, but I thank you, Tiffany. Oh my gosh, you all are so great. Thank you so much. I'm actually going to. I think I'll end it here, and I wanted to post some links to resources and places for people to donate in support of Black and Indigenous people of color. So I'm going to post there, and and I will, just for convenience sake, I did have a link with like the specific donate button prepared. So I will get that one there too. Oh, and I have Play on Philly as well. So yes, and I'm going to post these links once I have the recording of this stream as well. But thank you so much, everyone who came to our live session. Thank you to Stanford and Chaz. You all have such amazing things to say, and I'm just really appreciative of you for sharing your amazing insights. And oh my gosh, my camera looks so bad now because it's like it got dark outside and now it's like super dark. But yeah, thank you so much. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. I will be having some more conversations with different artists and students. And like I said, I'm going to be having this concert series starting later this month. So thank you again. Have a nice one. Bye, John and Priscilla, Duquesne, my mom. Y'all are great.
Thank you
Awesome.
for having us. Thank you
Yeah,
for
thanks for having us. Thank you, Camille. And good luck, okay?
Thank you, Stanford.
All right.
We'll see you both soon.
All right. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.